but basically we want to cover a few of the features in the Nspire for those who are currently using an 84 plus or 83 plus family to help reassure you that everything you want to do can be done in your classroom in the Nspire, and perhaps even better. We'll cover the home screen, the graphs and geometry applications, the lists and spreadsheet application, which is sort of similar to the data application on the 84. And as time permits, we'll have some time to answer some questions you might have.
And thank you, Howard, for sharing that. And I'll add to it, by the end of the webinar, you'll be able to, and again, as you can see on the slide, we will be visiting the calculator application, the graphs application. Those are part of the TI-Nspire options that you'll have available. And in addition, we also have the geometry application, and we'll look at some geometry in the context of a geometric plane, but also in the context of the XY axis and a regular Cartesian plane. And then finally, we'll look at entering data and graphing those data as we use the data and statistics application. I'm going to share my desktop now, and thanks very much, Eric, for sending that over. And I'll pause for a moment and let you share with folks about getting back to the chat if they need to do that.
Great. So if you look at the top of your screen, you see a little green tab. It says Viewing Betty Gasque's Desktop. If you hover your cursor over that, a little window drops down, and you have the participants window. If you click that, you can see everybody that's online right now. The chat window is next to that in the middle. If you click the chat icon, it'll return that chat window to the right side of your screen. So if you click on that icon, you can answer, or you can ask as many questions as you'd like during the event, and we'll enjoy answering them. Thanks, Betty.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And again, welcome everyone. As you can see, we've got a TI Smart View emulator where we can use this as part of the TI-Nspire teacher software to lead activities with the students, or simply to demonstrate to the students how to use certain features of the TI-Nspire. You'll notice with the emulator on the left side of the calculator keypad, it looks very much like some of the features you have on your computer keypad. We have the escape key, a little bit further down the tab key, and the control key. And the control acts as the second key would act in the TI-84 land, but again, it's very similar to what students would see on their computer keypads. I've clicked the On button, which actually becomes then the home screen once the handheld is turned on. And as you can see, it looks a little bit different here, but on the right-hand side, we've got the Documents menu. We'll talk about those in a few moments. Down at the bottom, we've got the various applications: calculator, graphs, geometry, list and spreadsheet, data and statistic, and notes. And we'll visit many of those tonight. There's also a scratch pad option, and we'll talk about that later in the evening. Tonight, I'm just going to simply start a new document, and as you can see from this particular window, I could just press number 1. Another option is pressing Tab. It's used in the same way you would use it on the computer to move from location to location, but it's simply easier sometimes just to press the number. So we're choosing a new document. Notice that the 6 applications are all available here. And to start with tonight, I'm going to add a calculator page. And this is a calculator application page. Now, we're going to look at many of the features that you like on your TI-84 and many of those features that you use for mathematical explorations. And those are all available, as Howard said, on the Nspire, and many more as well. So just to start with a couple of basics, I'm actually just going to simply add a couple of fractions. So we'll start perhaps with 3 divided by 7. Notice the operation keys are in the same place in the right-hand side of the screen, plus perhaps 9 divided by 11. This looks very similar, but then when we press Enter, we'll get a little bit different representation than we're used to. A fraction, and then the fractions that I entered actually changed to what we might call a math print type environment. To get an approximation, a decimal approximation, notice above the Enter button, very small perhaps, but there the approximation symbol, and so we press Control Enter, and we can see several representations of the same number. One of the nice features that we have on the TI-Nspire is the ability to arrow up with the touchpad and grab a previous answer if I highlight it and press Enter. and perhaps we want to add an additional number. We could also arrow up and grab by pressing Enter a previous problem that we had started, or application, in this case addition, and modify that as we go along. We also have many of the same keys that you're used to seeing, the X squared key, Control X squared is the square root key. One nice feature is that as we enter various numbers under the square root symbol, the symbol continues to move, and we can simply go ahead and compute, ooh, that was a surprise, whatever operation we want to do. We have other options that we didn't have before in this template key. It's a very strange looking key to the right of the number 9. And with the templates, you'll see there are a variety of templates. When I move down to the second row, first column, there's the absolute value template. Perhaps we want to take the absolute value of a number. But when we move back to the templates, we'll notice that on the top row, almost in the middle, we have a logarithm template. In this case, we can put in any base that we choose, and to move to the number location, I can press Tab or the right arrow key on the touchpad. Many of these templates I found can be used for explorations and concept development. We might ask students what would happen if the number 3 inside the parentheses was tripled. Using the operation ability to move up, grab a command, we could move back. There's a delete key for editing, and change the 3 to a 9. Students might think the output would triple, but as we see, it simply increases by 1. So by using many of these templates, we can actually let students look for patterns and develop mathematical concepts. Again, the editing is very easy because we're simply moving up. If you're not sure where to access a command, we have a menu button. And as you'll see as we go through tonight, the menu is appropriate for whatever type of application you have chosen with the TI-Nspire. In this particular case, the menu is available, as you see, for the calculator application. Just to demonstrate one more feature, I'll go to the number menu. My mouse is doing strange things tonight. So the number menu, and I could just press the number 2 and choose factor. So we do have some operations that we did not have available before. And I've just chosen a number that has some nice prime factors, 10,800. And as you'll see, very nice representations. Interestingly, on the TI-Nspire, if we know the word for a command, we can simply type it. Notice it almost looks like it's in italics right now, but when I put the last letter, the R, it almost straightens up. That's a hint to me that it's a calculator command. And in this time, I'm going to put the open parenthesis myself and simply double the number to 21,600. So we could ask students what they expect for the output, of course. And as we see, of course, the 2 is now raised to the 5th rather than to the 4th. So those are just a few of the basics of the calculator application. And again, whatever calculator command you would expect to be able to access is certainly available for the TI-Nspire. I think a nice feature, again, is being able to arrow up and grab those commands, and also being able to type commands if you're not sure where they're located and just don't choose to look in the menu. So Howard is now going to lead us through some interesting things related to the graphs application.
Actually, may I jump in, Betty, but before Howard moves on?
Certainly.
Could we go back to the templates? We just have an attendee that would like to see where the templates are located again.
Certainly. It's the little button to the right of the number 9.
Great. Thanks. And what I've always liked about the Nspire is that it feels so much like a computer that you can really explore. So you could, if you didn't remember where the templates are located, you could really start pressing buttons, and to get out of those windows, you can press Escape.
Absolutely. And thank you, Eric, for mentioning that. That brings up another comment. Someone asked me not too long ago if I was on a window in the calculator application, how would I know whether I was set in degrees or radians? Well, one thing that we could actually do is press the trig key, choose one of our trig functions, sine in this case, and I might ask students to try this and see if the sine of 30 degrees seems to come out as it should. And of course it does not show 1/2. But one nice feature is that with the touchpad, we simply move our cursor over this particular strange looking tool symbol up in the right corner, and it tells right now the angle is set in radians. So one of the nice features that we have available, if we pull down this operation, left arrow, in addition to the templates, to the right there's a catalog, but above the catalog we have some symbols. So control catalog, and obviously I was using this recently because there's the degree symbol that I had used. And this time, sine of 30 degrees is 1/2, of course, but we still left the setting in radians in case we needed it in radians for other operations.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and Howard, the graphs application.
Okay, well, Betty, I guess you need to go to the home screen so we can add a graphs window.
All right.
Button with a picture of a house is what we call the home screen. And there's graphs. If you click on that, folks who are new to the Nspire will notice that we now have 2 pages in this document. 1.1 is the calculator that Betty was working on earlier, and 1.2 is a second page. It's got the Cartesian axes on it, our X and Y. Pretty obviously this is going to be a graphing window. At the bottom of the window is an entry line. We no longer have to go to a separate screen to enter our function rules. It's right on the same screen with the actual graph on it. Let's enter a stupid simple function, f of x equals x. If you press enter, there it goes. We've got the graph of f1 of x. It says f1 because we can enter more than one function. This is the first function. Instead of y equals, it's f1 equals, emphasizing the function notation. And that entry line disappeared. Oh my God, how do we get it back? Well, there's a few ways. The one I like is Control G, which I remember is Control get back here. And there's the entry line again. This is defaulting to the second function because the first function is already taken. If we wanted, we could arrow up to the first function and modify it. And there it is. You can access the other functions. But I don't really want this right now. So I want that to go away. Please, Betty, would you Control G to Control get out of here? And we get more real estate to draw our graph. This graph is very interactive, which is really good for exploration for students. If you hover your cursor, Betty, over that end, now we get that sort of 2 arrows, kind of like going around in a whirlpool. If you slide along that function line, as you approach the origin, the cursor is going to change, slide up a little bit. Now we get the sort of cross with arrowheads on it. Slide further up into quadrant 1, and it changes back to the arrows. If you would grab the function now, Betty, by clicking, and as you drag that function, notice that the function rule is changing as Betty drags it. So we can dynamically change our function, and the students in this sort of exploration would see, it's not just the teacher told me that this is a slope or the slope changes this way or that way. They can see the function rule, which is pretty neat. Stop someplace where we can see that function rule. Another way we could change the function would be if you click on that function rule. If you hover on top, it says label, click on it, click a second time, and now we can edit. Let's say that f1 of x equals 3. Backspace, 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 3, enter, and it jumps to 3. Click again, let's make it f1 of x equals -3. As on the 84, the negative is different than the subtraction symbol. Okay, if we put that cursor, the pointer near the origin, when we had the plus sign, now click and drag that around. And now we're translating the graph. Before we were rotating, now we're translating, and notice that the y-intercept is now showing up in the function rule. As before, we can directly edit, let go, and let's change that -3x plus 2. And as She's going to edit it. Then when she presses enter, boom, the graph is going to jump to that point. Okay, what else do we do? We sometimes want to look at a function table. Well, the thing with the Nspire, there's all this stuff here. It could get real complicated, and sometimes people see the more experienced people doing things, and they say, how on earth am I ever going to remember all that stuff? The secret is you don't remember it. You say, I don't need to remember it because if I just pull the menu down, I can figure it out. If I want to get a function table, I don't know, let's try view. Go to the view menu and let's see if it's in there. Show table, yep, it was in there. I don't need to remember. Go down to 9 and show the table. There's our function table. If you use the arrows to go up, you can look at the negative x's. If you use the arrow to go down, you can see the more positive x's. And there it is. So we got the function table. And those are some of the basic things we can do on a graphs page. Betty, I think I'm going to pass it over to you. You want to explore some quadratic functions.
Okay, great.
Actually,
and we'll pause and see, Eric, if there are any questions.
Yeah, we have a couple questions. And this first one, I always feel a little guilty when I don't immediately know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. So when we're looking at the equation of a graph, can we have that coefficient be a fraction rather than a decimal?
I don't believe it can be displayed like that right now, but I'm sure that's
you can't directly do it because the measurements on the graphs page, the graphs and geometry page, is approximate measurements. So it's always going to go to decimal. There's ways you can get around it and make it appear as though it's a fraction, but the actual number it's using is an approximation, so it goes to decimal.
Yeah, and to speak to Howard's point, where you can make it appear to be a fraction, I think it's in April when we have our advanced authoring webinar, but we'll look at some of those more advanced techniques. And again, you could get that to happen, but it takes a couple steps to do it. We also have two questions relating to the view of the screen. How do we get rid of the table?
Howard, should I go ahead with that?
Yeah, go ahead and do that, please.
Okay. A moment ago, the right side of the graph, or the right side of the screen, was outlined in bold. That was because we had added the table. To move back to the graphing side of the screen, with the touchpad, you simply click on that side, and notice that side is now in bold. So as Howard said, the menu gives you all sorts of options, and if we want to view or not view something, we can click. That's like the left click on your mouse. And notice that the number 9, which was show table a minute ago, is now hide table. While we're here, you might want to notice number 6 is how Howard knew the shortcut Control-G for showing the entry line. So right now I'll go to hide table, and we have a full page graph again.
Okay. Great. And if we wanted to access some of the window options or the zoom options that are available in the TI-84 Plus, how would we do that?
Okay, great. One way is simply to go to the menu, and when we go to Windows/Zoom, we have all of the options we had with the 84, but several more. Notice we have a Zoom Quadrant 1. That's the 6th option currently, and that might be very nice for working with a function that you want students to primarily focus in Quadrant 1. Number 1, the window settings allows you to change just as you would on the 84, except currently with the -10 to 10 for x's, the x scale has auto-scaled, and that was every 1 for your tick marks. So to get out of any of those options, you can either press enter or escape. So notice the tick marks are at 1s. This is a standard window for the TI-Nspire, and when you graph in this particular window from -10 to 10, and -6 2/3 and +6 2/3 approximately, that is a true viewing window. So the graph is correct.
Great. And there's a couple questions that we'll just have to get back to people via chat, but maybe the last one in this little section is, suppose we want to get rid of the line. How might we do that?
Excellent question. There are a couple of ways to do it. The easiest way, without having to leave the graph screen and go into any special locations, I find the easiest. With the mouse again, the touchpad, I would be moving with my touchpad, and I simply move to the line and click on it. Notice as I move away, it's blinking. And you think about selecting something on the computer. If it's selected, the delete key will delete it, and the same thing with the Nspire. So that was one option. Another option, had we opened the entry line with the Control G, or there are a couple of other options for that. As Howard mentioned, if the line had been graphed, then opening that entry line back up again, Control G, would display all functions that are graphed. And before I learned to just click on the line and delete it, someone said, well, I could also delete the function there, and when I press enter, the function is gone. So those are a couple of easy ways to get rid of any function. But clicking on it, deleting it is probably the easiest route.
Great. Thanks, Betty.
Okay. And again, everything's available from the menu that you would need within a certain application. Now, as Howard mentioned, we were going to graph another function, and to do that, I could add another page. Howard showed one way to do it, but notice above the document button, there's a plus page, and that's to make it very easy for students to add another page without having to go to the home screen, even though you could. So we'll try this alternate method now, and that's Control Document, Add a Page, and we'll add another graphs page. Since we do a lot of graphing on our 84s, we wanted to visit that tonight. Notice that it rotates to F1 of X simply because I had cleared Howard's F1 of X. Otherwise, it would have gone to F2 of X. This time, I'll graph a quadratic function, x squared minus 1. And again, just press enter to graph. It becomes intuitive to students after a while because on the calculator page, they always press enter to get an answer. Now, we're going to show you another menu tonight, other than the ones we've just looked at with the graphs application. And one thing we always like to do is trace on our functions. And when we choose trace, notice the click key is right in the middle. We choose graph trace. And notice that it first went to a value very, very close to where x is equal to 0 in scientific notation, obviously very close. The y value for the function is -1, and that tells us we're at the minimum function value. I could use my right arrow keys to move on the function, and just like with the 84, at any point you can enter a value, perhaps 1.5 for x, and press enter, and it will move to that location. Press 1, followed by, well, let's not do that. Let's try an alternate method. Notice what happens as I'm tracing and getting very close to a 0 of the function. It actually jumps to that value, displays the fact that this is a 0 at F1, 1 for x, and 0 for y. I could also trace and move over to the other side and find the other 0 with the TI-Nspire. Some of you might be wondering about the tracing increment. For this particular window, it is set at 300ths, but one very nice feature is that I can go to Menu, Trace, and actually change that tracing increment. So the trace step may be changed perhaps every 0.5 if you're exploring a certain type of application where it suits well to trace by 1/2. So that's always an option. And notice right now my function value, the x value rather, is at 51/100ths. So if I move, I've gone up by 1/2 each time. So it started moving into tracing increment of 0.5. So that's one way we can find zeros of our functions and, of course, the minimum function values and, if appropriate, the maximum function values. We also have another nice menu option that many of you will be accustomed to from the 84, and that's Analyze Graph. Using Analyze Graph, we can find zeros, mins, max, intersection, the value of the numeric derivative at a certain point, or integral values. And so if we wanted to look at the 0 of the function, for example, using this method, notice that it's asking for a lower bound. Here I'm just using my arrow keys, or you can actually swipe with the touchpad click to choose an lower bound rather. It immediately asks for an upper bound, and as long as your upper bound is past your 0, pressing enter will actually display that 0. And using the Analyze menu, we could find a second 0 in a similar way. When I hover over a number or over the label of a function, it appears to be an open hand. If you were using your handheld, you would press Control followed by click. Notice the closed hand in the middle of the touchpad. With the mouse on a computer, I hold down the left click and simply drag the label, or in this particular case, the ordered pair for the 0. This is a quadratic, but Howard showed you how to translate a linear function. If we move near the center, near the vertex, we can also grab a quadratic and move it around, looking at the translation. And notice that it is in vertex form, which really helps to teach students about transformations. We can also move near one of the edges of the graph, Control-click to grab it, and dilate the function, and again, displaying that equation in vertex form. This shows some of the basics of analyzing the graphs and also translating and dilating it. But again, it's a very powerful tool for helping students understand these transformations and also thinking about the multiple representations. A few minutes ago with Howard's example, we saw the graph, the label for the graph, its function, and also the table. And here we have very powerful multiple representations as well. So we're going to add a geometry page in a moment and look at some options there in case, Eric, there's some questions we should respond to.
Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, and it's really exciting. So if I haven't gotten back to you yet, forgive me. But one of the more recent questions is there a zoom to fit?
Yes, there is. And in this particular window, -10 to 10, for example, if I go to Menu, back to the window options that someone asked about earlier, we do have Zoom Fit, just as we did with our TI-84. Notice that Zoom Fit's near the bottom of the list, and letter A may just be hit on the keyboard, or you could arrow down and press Enter. I'll just hit the letter A, and that Zoom Fit has been adjusted. It adjusts the window in several ways, actually. Very similar to the 84 Zoom Fit.
Great, thanks.
And since that window issue came up, forgive me, Eric, one other way that you can actually modify a window very quickly that we could not do on our 84 is simply hover over an axis in value. And as Howard said before, when you're hovering over a number, if you click twice, it opens up a text box. So if I wanted this particular X max, for example, to be the number 6, I can just type 6 and press Enter. This allows us to look at different windows without leaving the graph and going to a menu option.
Great. And we have a couple of participants that are wondering if when we show a command using the document key, if we might be able to show that other ways, because some of the ClickPad users, or all of the ClickPad users, don't have that document key.
Oh, certainly. I'd be happy to. And as a matter of fact, if you are using the new teacher software, there is a way to switch to the ClickPad right here. And if you wanted to add another page, you would certainly have other options there. One nice shortcut that works on both pads is Control followed by the letter I for Insert, and that's a way to insert a new page. And another feature that we should look at with the ClickPad, notice I'm doing Control left arrow to move to the preceding page, and that's an option for both ClickPad and touchpad. Suppose I wanted to add a table on this particular screen. As Howard said, table was in the menu, and we would hit Show Table, which is number 9, shortcut Control T. But moving from side to side on the touchpad, we simply click. But notice right above the Tab key, there's this little symbol from side to side. So that's a way to move from side to side with the click pad, and that method also works with a touch pad. So as Eric said at the beginning, if you have the latest operating system for your TI-Nspire, anything that we do tonight may be done with either the click pad or the touch pad. Great.
And while we're here, or maybe if we could go back to the page with the list and spreadsheet and the graph, because there have been a couple questions, and if you'll notice now, the list and spreadsheet application, it's highlighted. That whole right side of the page is highlighted. There's that black bar up across the top. If we press menu,
and this will give us our table menu.
Yes, so that's what I was leading at. Each application has its own menu, so the menus might look different depending upon which application is highlighted. Let's see. That's great. Thank you.
And since Eric mentioned that, many of you may have wondered if you can change your increment for your table just as you could for the 84, and under that menu for your table there is a way to edit the table settings so that the step size may be changed as well. So again, if you're on a particular area of the screen and you need anything to go with that area, the menu will give you that.
Great. And then maybe one last thing, since we're right here, and it's just too tempting to pass up. We have a question from Rick. He'd like to know if we can quickly adjust the tick mark intervals without going to a menu and without double-clicking the minimums and maximums.
Oh, certainly. And let me move to another page where there's a little bit more space. By the way, this little arrow down here at the bottom, this little symbol called a chevron, will also show that entry line, and notice it tells you that when you hover over it. So if we had a graph just as Howard had done earlier, and you want to do any changes with the tick marks, and this is also a lovely zoom feature, you can actually just simply grab one of the tick marks and do a zoom out or a zoom in depending upon your window and how much you wish for it to zoom in or zoom out. So it's really nice to have all of these features to change the screen dynamically rather than having to leave it and go to menus, because then students see exactly what is happening. Thank you.
Yeah. And Betty, also you could show them that we can directly edit it. By clicking on that 0.5, you can make it 0.75 or make it...
Great, which is another option, just like
whatever scale you want, boom, we'll do it for you.
Thank you, Howard.
We aim to please here. Or count by fives, or whatever. You can make it whatever you want. Okay, Eric, should we move on to the next topic?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think Betty suggested we should add a geometry page, so go for it, Betty. Option 3, geometry. Well, that looks sort of like the graphs page except for the axes. And also, if you look in the upper right, you see a little scale that says 1 centimeter. Depending on what you're doing, you might want that, you might not want it. If you don't want it, well, you could always go to menu and see if we can find a way to get rid of it. Menu, view, looks like a view sort of thing. Yep, and if we wanted number 7, we could get rid of it. We don't have to get rid of it, but the options are there to customize your environment. Again, this is going to be the teacher's choice based on your own experience. Do you think it's going to confuse a student? Some students, the more stuff that's on the screen, the more things they get confused by. Others, it helps them explore better. So it's there. It's an option. Let's draw something. First, let's look at the menu. What are the options we have available in this kind of application? Actions, view, well, that's available in almost all of the applications. Window zoom, available everywhere. Trace is kind of interesting. That's available in graphs. Points and lines. Let's take a look at what points and lines are. We got points on a thing, we got intersection points, line, segment, ray. These are our various options. For people who are familiar with working in Geometry Sketchpad, one thing that might throw you a little bit when you first start with Nspire is the syntax is, I sort of describe it as being backwards from Geometry Sketchpad. that in Geometry Sketchpad you tend to select something and then choose what action you want to take on the thing. In Nspire, we're going to choose what action we want to take and then describe the object of the action. So you have to sort of adjust your thinking on that if you've got your reflexes set for a sketchpad. Let's put some points on the screen. So we want, I guess, menu option 1. That looks like a point. And choose any old spot that looks nice. Lay down a point. Boom. And there's a point. Choose another spot, and let's lay down a point. Click. And you know, it's sometimes nice, especially when you're teaching, to be able to say which point it is. So it would be nice to have a label for that point. If we, before touching anything else, type a letter, we will label that point. So Betty, now if you'd say capitals, because we want to label points with capital letters, let's call that point A. The point that's already on the screen, well, there's ways to label that after the fact, but we're trying to do a quick presentation here, so we'll skip that for now. Let's put down another point and call that point B. So we've got an unnamed point and we've got A and B. Let's go to the menu and choose a segment tool. That might be fun to have. Where do you think? How about 7, points and lines? I remember segments were in there. There it is, number 5, segment. And let's make segment AB. Click. You notice that when she's on top of point A and point B, the pointer says, hey, you're on top of point B. So there's no ambiguity whether you are in the right spot or not. And in the upper left of the screen, there's a reminder that we still have the segment tool active. To get rid of that tool, we have to press escape. And now it's gone. Now we can just drag things around. We can drag point A. We can drag point B to change where it is. Or I think we can drag the segment, right, Betty? Grab in the middle of the segment and move the entire segment. Yep. So that was kind of fun. Let's draw something else. Let's go to menu. Let's draw some sort of shape. Looks like option 9. How about a circle? Let's draw a circle with center A and radius AB. There we've got the circle. A little bit of it is off the screen, so if we escape from the circle tool and drag B a little bit closer to A, or else A a little bit closer to B, we can get that whole thing on the screen. And what sort of explorations might you want to do in a class with the circles and I guess AB as a radius? We could explore the ratio of circumference to radius. So let's take a look at that. Go to the menus. Let's see if we can measure a circumference. There's a measurement tool, number 8. Circumference, I guess, is a kind of length, so let's choose tool number 1. And if you just point at the circle, it highlights, and you notice grayed out underneath it is that number, I can't see it clearly. Is that 32.9? 32.9. And now you're still in the measurement tool, which is good because we want to measure the radius. So point to radius AB, click, and then drag that somewhere near the circumference. And from here we could do a quick calculation. If you have a class of these, you're going to have any number of different circles with different circumferences and radiuses. Let's quickly go to the scratch pad and check the ratio. The scratch pad is that button there that looks like a calculator moving real quickly. So click on that, and you can see that there's sort of a window on top of your geometry window. Let's see. Let's take the circumference, if I recall, was 32.9, and we're going to divide that by the radius was 5.24. $6.27863. And you collect this from a whole class of kids, and they're going to notice that I guess this is a rounding error. We're expecting something closer to 6.28. But you do this with the whole class, and you can sort of emphasize that, hey, this is a constant. Regardless what circle you've got the same same number coming out. Let's close the scratch pad. I do it by pressing escape. I'm not sure, Betty, if you've got another way to do it.
For our friends using the click pad, this is a good time to, for everyone to notice that if you just press home, you also have access to the scratch pad by hitting A for calculate. So it's just give a quick calculation.
Was it Control-0 is the scratch pad also?
Yes.
For
Control-0 will also access the scratch pad on either the touch pad or the click pad. So Control-0 and then escape to leave the scratch pad.
Okay, so let's take a look at some more stuff on graphs. Betty, would you like to take this next topic?
Certainly, I will. And just to follow up on someone's question earlier about getting rid of equations, since Howard's had us put this extra point here, another nice easy way to delete anything that you choose to delete is simply click on that object. Notice the point is blinking. It may not be very easy to see, but it is, and hit the delete key and it is gone. So that's very easy to delete anything that you added accidentally rather than having to start over.
Oh, Betty, quickly, before you move on, can you change the radius of the circle and show that those measurements are dynamic and they'll change as you change the circle?
Certainly. Thank you, Howard. And then you brought up something else when we were doing a quick calculation to look at the quotient. These, of course, are rounded measurements. And one wonderful feature that we have is if we just simply hover over a measurement, and my mouse keeps moving here, but if we hover over a measurement and then hit the plus key, it will give us more values of accuracy. I'm going to hold that for just a second and then hit the plus key. So we're going to look at another geometric construction, but before we move to that, Eric, are there other questions?
Nope, we're doing pretty good. I've been answering some of the more specific ones on chat, so we're in good shape.
Okay, great. And thank you, Howard. And if you think of other things to add on this next geometric construction, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and add another graphs page. And again, I could press Control-I for insert. I could go to the home screen to simply add another page that way. And when we go to the home screen, you can just simply, with either tab, if you're using the click pad, and choose an application, the geometric, or you could click on it if you're using the touch pad. So this is now up to page 1.5. So within this document, we keep adding pages. And so even if we don't plan to save the document, currently it is not yet saved, it's nice just to be able to continue to add pages to look at different applications. Now, if this is going to be a geometric construction just simply so that we would reflect something about a line, for example, this would be the proper environment. But to explore doing a geometric construction and actually reflecting across one of our axes, I actually should have chosen the graphs application so that we will have our axes. So number 3 for geometry, if you simply want to draw a line and reflect across that line, or if we want to reflect across one of our axes, we would choose Add Graphs, and then we've got our axes set. I've noticed in many state assessments, students are actually asked to look at the coordinates of a triangle, for example, and see how those coordinates change when you reflect across the x-axis or the y-axis. And notice we've gone to F3 of X because earlier we used F1 for a line and F2 for a quadratic. To close this entry line, there are a couple of different ways, but the easiest way is just to hover right here over the chevron, and it tells you it will close the entry line. Howard's shortcut of Control-G we looked at earlier also works. So I'm going to actually draw a geometric construction in one of the quadrants. But before we do that, we may wish to place a grid on to help students figure out what's going to happen when we reflect and look at those coordinates. So to do a grid, we'll go to Menu, and if we'd like to see a grid, I try to use the hint of View. Students don't seem to mind pressing any buttons, and if they press the wrong button, they simply hit Escape, so they don't try to memorize where anything is particularly. Notice that we could hide the axes if we needed to. We can show a grid. And one of the options I'm not going to choose tonight, but we could, is actually hide those axes in values. but right now we'll simply show a grid. So now we have the XY axes with the grid displayed, and the grid is aligned with the scaling, every one. Now we're going to go back to menu, and notice you have some of the same options that you had on the geometry page that Howard was working with earlier. Shapes is still with us, even though we're in the Cartesian plane. So we'll choose shapes, and instead of a circle this time, we'll choose a triangle. Now, this triangle does not need to be necessarily attached to the grid marks, but if we do attach it, the coordinates will be, of the vertices will be what you might call pretty numbers for the younger students. So I'll click where it says point on, and that will attach it to the grid point. Click again, and then simply click a third time to finish the triangle. Notice I did not label the vertices. It would have probably been smart to do that. As Howard said, if you label, as soon as you click by pressing Shift and whatever letter you would like, it will label automatically, and that would be true for each of the 3 vertices. There is a way to label after the fact. I'm going to hit Escape now, and what we might ask students to do, of course, is reflect this triangle across the x-axis and predict the coordinates of vertex C. So very quickly, just to label those coordinates, I'll go to Menu, and if I'm not sure where the labeling of the coordinates is, I might start at the first menu option and just look around. If it's not there, we hit Escape and move to another one. But notice number 7 is Coordinates and Equations. So I'll choose Coordinates and Equations, move very close to vertex C, click once to say that is the vertex we would like, click a second time to drop those coordinates. So labeling is very easy to do, and we could do that for all 3 if time permitted. To reflect that triangle across the X or Y axis, we'll go to Menu and look to see if there are any transformation tools. And as you can see, there is an option for transformation, and we actually have the traditional transformation tools, and this time I'll choose reflection. One of the nicest features of the Nspire is that we have some built-in help for each menu option. For example, if you're not sure whether to click the line of reflection first or to click the object, you simply hover over this menu tool and it will give you directions on what to do next. So I'll click the object, which is the triangle, and then come and click the axis. And we have the reflection. So everyone who's a teacher knows what questions we should ask the students, but if they want to verify their prediction of the reflection of vertex C, they could simply go back to Menu, go back to Actions, choose Coordinates and Equations, and then move to whichever vertex is appropriate. Menu, Actions, and the 7th option for Coordinates and Equations. Click on that vertex, and of course the x's are the same, the y's have opposite values. One really nice feature is if you drag any vertex in the pre-image, you'll see the change in the image. And also we could actually move the entire triangle, and students can see what happens with the pre-image and the image. So we have some nice construction tools that can be used on the XY axes to explore various algebraic and geometric concepts. Eric, questions here?
There have been a few, but I've fielded those using the chat. We're nearing the end of the hour, and I know that we'd like to get to a list and spreadsheet page, so I'm wondering if we might be able to do an abridged version of what we had originally intended to do. So maybe just add a few data points and show a data and statistics page.
Okay, absolutely. Howard?
Yeah, okay.
And then after that, so again, it looks like we're going to go, no later than an extra 5 minutes. So at the end, if you could stay on, we've got some information at the end that might be of value to you. And whatever we didn't get to tonight is available in the on-demand webinars, which we'll talk about in maybe 3 minutes or so. Thanks.
Okay, and I'll talk real fast. Okay, so now we're going to, oh no, that's too fast. So we want to add a list in spreadsheets. Again, multiple ways to do it. We don't need to beat you over the head with that. I just checked earlier today the National Weather Service for where I live, which is in Westchester County, New York. Last night, Westchester Airport at 1 o'clock had, well, let's call this column A will be time. So in that cell you are, we're going to call that time. So it's the white space that says A and above the place where it has rows. We're going to have times 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 o'clock. So we're just going to put in the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I swear I did not fake this data. You can check yourselves, if you don't trust me, that this is the data for White Plains Airport. This column we're going to put temperature. So let's just type TEMP. And at 1 o'clock, the temperature was 34 degrees Fahrenheit. At 2 o'clock, the temperature was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. At 3 o'clock, the temperature was 30 degrees Fahrenheit. At 4 o'clock, the temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. And at 5 o'clock, you can guess it, it was 26. I did not fake this data.
I don't know if I believe you.
I swear. When we can share my desktop, I'll show it to you. Okay, so we've got some data. We've got some labels. One is called time, the other is called temp. And so we can analyze this very quickly in a way you cannot do it all on the 84 Plus. So this is above and beyond. Let's add a data and spreadsheet on this page. So go to menus, and let's see if we can figure a way to add a data and statistics graph. Let's do a quick graph. There we go. There it is. Not the graph we wanted, right? Because this looks like it's a frequency plot. We want a graph with a X and a Y axis. And as Betty did for a second there, well, you know also, what's our independent variable is going to be time, right? This is temperature. So we want to click that and change it to time. Still, it's a frequency plot. Go up to where the y-axis would be, and suddenly we appear with a tooltip. Click to add a variable. Click it, and let's add temperature here. That's our dependent variable. And now there's our data. Very quickly, we analyze the data, get a graphic representation of the data. We have menu options. If you go to menu, we could probably do a regression line. We could analyze, see what functions we have. We could add a movable line, make our own line and see what the graph is, do regressions. We could have the various things you would probably want to do if you were analyzing this sort of stuff.
And M1 stands for movable line, and as Howard said, regression is available if you choose it.
And so there's, very quickly, there's some of the functions you can do with data. Betty, I think you had some more stuff you wanted to do with categorical data, or were we going to run out of time with that?
I don't think we're going to have time for the categorical data, but
so they'll just have to dial in next time for the categorical data.
Yeah, or go back to the past, and because I know there was a webinar in November where we looked specifically at data and statistics and lists and spreadsheets. So that link that Steve pasted in the chat window, archived webinars, if you're really interested in what we've been doing for the last 2 or 3 minutes, I don't know the specific date, but it's very clear with the title of that webinar. I think it was November 30th, like the lists and spreadsheet and data and statistics, TI-Nspire.
And again, the power of the multiple representations, because if you ever change a data value, for example, if Howard had been teasing us and this was really 33 degrees, it warmed up a little bit, notice that the data point changed, the data graph point changed, and the regression equation was updated immediately.